kinds of crazy because I've just finished work. I've just walked home as well. I'm like flustered, but I thought I've only got a certain time frame that I can film before I get back to work. I've got like not long. So I wanted to do this as like a follow-up video from the one that I did last week, which was about how to not be a sad girl or something along those lines. And I wanted to talk about being a happy girl and how we're gonna be a happy girl now. I probably won't call it that because that sounds a bit cheesy, but how to kind of step back into our happy era, I don't know. I'm working on it, it's a work in progress, but I've got a lot of points that I wanted to sort of get across in this video. I wanted to incorporate how we can implement the happier side of things. I'm really chatting shit, like I don't know what's going on right now. I'm flustered. So yeah, it's all well and good me saying like, yeah, don't be a sad girl, there's no point of being a sad girl, blah blah blah. But there's no point of that if I'm not going to give you helpful advice on how to kind of step into a different mind frame. And I am not saying that you shouldn't feel all of your emotions, like that is the opposite of what I'm saying, and you will see that in the video. But I'm just saying how, for me, from my own personal experience, and I have suffered and still can suffer with feelings of depression. I don't want to say that I can be depressed, but I've definitely been depressed in the past, and I'm still a human being. Like I feel the emotions of a human, which is normal. And I don't want you to think that I'm saying don't feel your emotions, because that is the complete opposite. Just wanted to say that because I never want to be an advocate for like toxic positivity, because I know how damaging that can be. But, sorry, I'm just looking down at my notes. If you see me looking down, it's at my notes. So the first point that I've really wanted to get across to you is to stop being so infatuated and obsessed with the concept of being happy. I know that happiness is something that we all strive for. We think that we want happiness. We think that's the end goal. We think that everything that we do is to achieve happiness. And for the longest time, I used to say that when people ask me like, oh, what do you want in life? I used to be so cheesy and be like, I just want to be happy, which I still stand by that. Like I don't want to mock like my past versions of myself, because that was during a time where I was just genuinely very unhappy, like constantly. And I was in a circumstance where I didn't feel safe, I didn't feel content or comfort of any kind. Like all I wanted was happiness. But when I think back now, that's not what I'm aiming for. Do you know what I mean? I'm not aiming for like this end goal of happiness, because happiness is something that we feel in every moment. It's something that can be felt in any moment at all. We can feel it right now. So there's no point of me or you aiming to be happy when you can feel that now. Like that shouldn't be an end goal. That should be a consistent kind of goal. And I think a lot of the times we can, because we so desperately want happiness, we can really resist negative emotions and anything that doesn't feel good to us. We live in an age now where happiness is literally at a click of a finger. We can go on TikTok and we can get a quick boost of dopamine, or we can eat some food, get some fast food delivered to our door, and we can eat that, and that will make us feel happiness momentarily. But this is kind of cultivated, I think, this like constant striving for everything to make you happy, when that isn't the reality of life. And we are allowed to feel negative emotions. It's not something that we should resist or shy away from. And I do think that when we shy away from these emotions, we are truly kind of like disrespecting happiness in a way, because without the bad emotions, there aren't any good ones. Like the good ones don't exist, or the concept of good emotions, you wouldn't class them as good because there isn't bad. So yeah, I think it's good to have a balance, and I never understood this concept. Like I just thought, no, I want to be happy, but that was because I was in survival mode basically. Like I just wanted happiness because I thought, I don't see how I can possibly feel any happiness right now. I am just desperately trying to be happy. So I would turn to things that would give me instant gratification and make me happy in that moment. I feel like I was addicted to social media, but in a way that like most people are these days. Like we are just constantly glued to our phone and scrolling through everything and trying to find stimulus in every single thing that we do in the day. and it's not necessary. I think when we resist these negative emotions so much and we focus so much on happiness, we're not thickening our skin. Do you know what I mean? We're not learning from the things that these emotions are trying to teach us. If we're feeling sad and feeling down, there's something that our body is telling us, something that we need to tune into. We need to tap into those feelings and really just appreciate them and respect them for what they are, because all of the emotions together all add up to the collective experience of human life, which is amazing. It can be so amazing. So we don't need to desperately scramble for happiness all the time, and I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, because we just think, oh yeah, we need to be happy constantly. And it's like, no, we are allowed to have downtime. We are allowed to put our phones down and just breathe and exist in this moment and be happy and content. The second point I want to make is that we need to kind of, if we're feeling this constant, like I was, feeling this constant state of unhappiness and lack of safety and security and comfort, we need to really figure out what it is that's making us unhappy, because the only way that we can change our lives is when we get awareness of what is going wrong in our lives, like what we don't want to bring with us. And I know that like shadow work and stuff like that, shadow work, inner child healing, all these kind of things seem so scary and so terrifying, and people don't want to delve into their trauma because it's trauma. Like it's not something that we want to revisit or relive in any way. But I've always been very, very curious about my emotions and like why I'm feeling a certain way. So I have always naturally done shadow work and inner child work, all that kind of stuff. But it's only recently that I've intentionally started to do it and really dig deep and understand certain triggers and certain things that are actually making me unhappy, and how to, most importantly, find the solutions to those things. Now, there's not always a solution to everything immediately anyway. We're not always going to find the answers to our problems like so quickly, but we can try to look for the solutions, and we can work towards that every single day to eventually become more satisfied, I want to say, with our life. I don't want to say happy, because we should be happy all the time. Not all the time, but like we can be happy whenever. But just to get you sort of out of that place, like the rock bottom place. So as much as it is like so scary to do shadow work and all that kind of stuff, it has honestly helped me so much, like leaps and bounds. I have learned so much about myself from doing intentional shadow work and journaling and inner child work and stuff like that. Like I say, I used to do, I've always journaled, like my whole life I've always journaled my thoughts, because I never had anyone to speak to as such, or never felt safe enough to speak about how I felt based on just my like childhood wounds. And I found that what really helps me, or has helped me through like the toughest times of my life, like the worst times ever, is to just get my phone out. And if I don't want to, obviously I can always speak to my best friend, but if I don't want to speak, or I don't feel like I can speak to anybody about what I'm going through, I'll just pick up my phone. I'll go on the voice memos app on my phone. If you've got like an Android, I'm sure there must be like a feature as well, I'm not too sure, but just recording what I'm saying, like just speaking freely with no judgment, just getting every single thought in my mind off my chest, and then just letting it all out, just letting it out, because we don't want to keep that in here. Obviously it's good to journal, like we can journal as well, but I think sometimes it's a bit easier to just pick up your phone and just speak into it, because sometimes we do just need someone to talk to, but we might not always have somebody, and it's just a nice way to, it does kind of feel like you're leaving like a voice note for your friend to like then pick up. But even though you're not gonna show this to anyone, or you don't have to show this to anyone, you kind of, as you're speaking, you start to realize certain things. When you actually say things out loud and you hear yourself saying these things out loud, you're a bit like, oh, okay, I could do this, or I could do that. That's not how I really think. Do you know what I mean? We kind of spot out where we're being irrational or being a bit maybe dramatic. And obviously, like, you can always, if you've got people to speak to, it is great to speak to people, but I would say don't get too reliant on other people to sort your issues, because the reality is you're probably going through a lot of deep shit, and not everybody can unpack those emotions in the way that is helpful. the only person who really has the true solution. Like, we can get all the advice that we want in the world, but the only person with the true solution to our problems is us. We are the only people who know how to deal with our problems. We have that inner knowledge within all of us. We just need to tap into that. And I do think that like journaling and all that kind of stuff really helps. Your emotions are telling you something. And I think the more that we get in touch with our emotions and the things that we're feeling and why we're feeling it, the more that we can understand how to kind of navigate our own personal life. Because like I said before, no one else is going to be able to tell us exactly what to do. Like, there's not a blueprint from somebody else. Like, we're the only person with the blueprint, essentially. We have all that knowledge within us, but we just need to tap into it. So just really honouring your emotions, but obviously, like I said in the last video as well, not dwelling, but just observing them, I would say. Just getting curious. When you're feeling really irrational or really anxious or really angry about something, I don't know, any emotion, just taking a step back and observing it for what it actually is and trying to be a bit rational about it, which I know is so much easier said than done, but it really gives you a bit of perspective to kind of evaluate the situation, even if you need to experience that emotion and then afterwards be thinking, oh, okay, right, yeah, that was a bit irrational. Like with the voice memo thing, it just allows you to kind of train yourself to become a bit of an observer, and obviously meditation and things like that help so much with that. The next point is to stop relying on external things to bring you happiness or joy, whatever, pleasure. Stop relying on that. Okay, I feel like I always get interruptions, but now I'll be a bit more quiet because there's people in. But this is the way of my life at the minute. It's fine, we work through these things. What I was saying is that we need to stop relying on external things to bring us happiness, because I think I've touched on this. I can't remember, this is the issue with like stopping and starting, but when we rely on external things to bring us happiness, we have a certain expectation on those things to make us feel happy, and if they don't make us feel happy, it can leave us feeling like really hopeless and thinking, oh, like what now, because this thing didn't make me happy but it usually makes me feel happy, so what's going on, like why am I not happy? And then I think that can make you feel even more sad. I think sometimes we just need to sit with ourselves and just assess what we're feeling and just not put any pressure on trying to feel a different kind of way. I think we just try and force these feelings out of the window, and then we go to all these like mind-numbing things or stimulants to try and make us feel better, but then, I mean, sometimes it works, but then other times it doesn't, and then when it doesn't, it makes us feel even lower than before. So yeah, just not relying on things like people, social media, food, anything, like not relying on external things, because the only way that you're gonna find true peace and fulfillment in your life is if you learn how to be with your own emotions and just embrace them. I feel like all of my points like lead back to the same kind of general gist, but repetition is key for it to sink in. That is how we learn, and that's fine. Also, happiness isn't easy. It's not always easy anyway. I think because we've experienced happiness, or most of us, I'm assuming all of us, at some point in our life have experienced effortless happiness, where happiness just comes to us and it feels so easy and it's like, oh my god, this is amazing. So we try and replicate that, but we're never going to replicate that same feeling, because that's just how life is. Like, you can't, have you ever tried to, no, have you ever listened to a song and it's the first time you listen to the song and it brought out some sort of good feeling in you, but then you try and listen to it again because obviously it brought out this good feeling, it maybe inspired you to think something, or I don't know, but then you listen to the song again and it doesn't quite hit the same? That is because we can't replicate those things. We can't force happiness. It might come along effortless to begin with, but then sometimes it's harder. We have to make a conscious effort to cultivate happiness and lean into happiness when it's not necessarily easy to. And I think that's where a lot of us kind of think, oh, there's no point, I'm just gonna bask in my misery. If we realise that happiness is something that we do have to cultivate and we do have to choose happiness. It is something that we can choose. Yes, it can feel maybe a little bit forced, it can feel a little bit not authentic, but we have to start thinking about our daily habits and the things that we're doing. If we are maybe edging more towards being negative about a situation, or if we're edging more towards being positive about a situation. And like I said in the beginning, I don't encourage toxic positivity or anything like that, but I do think sometimes we have the choice to be happy, and even though that might not be instant, we might not choose like, oh yes, I'm going to be happy right now, and then we're happy. Like, it doesn't work like that. As long as we're making sure that our habits and our things that we're doing in that moment are pushing us towards being more happy or being more fulfilled. So say you could go and eat a takeaway, that would probably give you a moment of happiness, but it's probably going to make you feel even worse down the line. But if you ate something healthy with all your nutrients in, yeah, it might feel a little bit like, oh, at the time a bit boring, but you will feel so much better in the long run. And that is like a tiny little step that you can take towards leaning into that positive feeling and being more positive about your approach to life. You don't always have to give in to the comforts and the easy route of happiness if you want it to be sustainable, if you want it to be balanced, and so you're feeling like kind of less up and down. I was reading a book not too long ago and I can't remember what it was called, but she was talking about the emotional scale. I think it's the emotional scale or the emotional ladder by Abraham Hicks, I think. And it's basically saying like in a situation you could be like right at the bottom feeling like at your very worst, so it would be stupid to jump right to the top and be like, oh yes, I'm so happy, like excited. That's what a lot of us try and do, and then we just get met with disappointment because it doesn't feel right. It feels like we're forcing it, it feels fake, and it feels like toxic positivity. But what we can do in that moment is we can climb up one step of that ladder and feel the most positive feeling that we can in that moment, or do the most positive thing that we can possibly do within our like emotional means, and kind of gradually work back up that emotional ladder rather than forcing yourself to like jump right to the top, because you're probably just going to fall right down anyway and you're going to hit the ground even harder. So if you just try and like climb up it in like tiny little steps while you can, because we can't always do the most. Like, we sometimes do just need to, you don't need to move mountains to be happy. You can gradually implement things in your daily routines that will make you lean into that positive feeling, or lean into that happiness or the fulfilled life that you want. Now, I do understand that some of us, it can feel uncomfortable to be happy. It can feel uncomfortable to try and be positive if we've been brought up in a way where that isn't the norm. Like, we're not taught that. We're taught that we need to be miserable and we need to be negative and we need to complain about everything. If that is how we were brought up, then sometimes it is going to feel like a bit of a threat when someone's telling you like be positive, or even if you're trying to be positive yourself, like it just feels like you're resisting it so much more, and it's just so much harder to attain that happiness or that positivity. So just knowing like, it's fine, like you don't need to be negative and dwell in all that negativity, but you also don't need to jump right up to the top of the scale and be this really out there crazy happy bundle of joy. You don't need to do that. Like, you can just walk up the ladder one step at a time. I think if you're still feeling like that and you're still feeling like it's vulnerable and it's uncomfortable to step into that more happier feeling emotion, or that more positive feeling emotion, it's probably because you still haven't addressed childhood wounds that need to be addressed. But that's fine, because I will do a whole other video on that and how important inner child work is, etc. And my last point that I wanted to make is that not everything is that serious. Not everything's that deep. Like, it's really not. You don't need to be over analysing every single situation and thinking of every single possible outcome, or trying to interpret that person's words in a certain way, even though they just said something and they might have just meant that thing. I think if you just take people's words at face value and take people at face value and not look too much into things, I know it can be hard if that is another thing that we've learnt to emotionally soothe ourselves with. If we emotionally soothe ourselves with overthinking a situation, because that's just how we comforted ourselves in distressing times. But if you're you're a recovering overthinker like myself, you can just know that it's not that deep. It's really not that deep, and you don't need to be, it's not your job even to be looking so deeply into things. Like, you're not being made for that. Just take people at face value, take things that people say at face value, and just relax. Like, don't worry about it. Don't stress. It's fine. Like, I think sometimes, like, even I need to remind myself of that sometimes, because I can just get so carried away with thinking all these things. Like, my mind is constantly active and full of all these ideas that sometimes, like, it's hard to turn my brain off, which is something that I am actively working towards getting better at. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, please subscribe and leave a like and a comment, especially a comment. Like, I really want to know what you guys think about this and what your perspective is on it. And yes, apologies for like the flakiness of this video. It probably might not seem flaky, but I've had to like come and go, and it's okay. But yes, I very much appreciate you guys for getting to the end of this video and watching, and yes, much love.